Welcome to Canadian Innovators, the show that celebrates innovation, entrepreneurs, and the Canadian spirit. I'm Jocelyn, and every week we introduce a new entrepreneur or expert in the economy to tell their story and unpack the challenges of keeping jobs in Canada, as well as share ideas for economic growth and prosperity. Today on the program, we are going to talk about the push for electrification that is happening virtually unchallenged in Canada and in Ontario in particular. When you reflect that Canada contributes to approximately 1.5% of the greenhouse gases to the global environment, this push for electrification seems confusing at best. What are the consequences of this push? What will it mean to our manufacturing base and Ontario citizens? Is there an energy crisis that is bearing down on the province? Today, we shine some light on these issues. Joining me to discuss is Tom Ladanyi, president of TL Energy Regulatory Consultants, who acts as an intervener for the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada on electricity issues. And to put this topic into perspective for the small to medium-sized manufacturers is Shalini Seth, director of her family business, Surati Sweets, an Indian baked goods company located in Scarborough, Ontario, with locations in India and the United States. Welcome to the program, folks.
Thank you for having me, Jocelyn.
Well, I'm happy to be here. And let me just plug Surati, the best baked goods, the best pistachio cookies in the world. Shalini, you've been on the program previously, but for viewers that missed that segment, could you please tell us about your family story? It's an absolutely amazing one.
Sure. I mean, it's, I guess, what you can call the Canadian dream. My family was displaced from their country, Uganda, Africa, and my father came here as a refugee. My grandfather followed soon after, and we actually had this family business in Uganda, Africa. And they found out that my grandfather was here. We saw a need for it, and it's 40 years now that we've been manufacturing and selling our baked goods and our snacks, now almost worldwide. So,
and amazing, your grandfather started making these baked goods in his basement. Is that correct?
That's correct. We started making them at home. My father, my mother, my aunts and uncles, everyone worked outside to support it. And when we actually saw that, there is a need, there's a demand for it, we all kind of went, you know what, this is a great opportunity for us. I'm third generation to join, so I actually worked in manufacturing and supply chain in previous industries. So I joined about 10 years ago, along with my brother, who took over the sales and marketing, and I took over operations. So truly a family dynamic family story, and it's great to be able to continue the legacy my grandfather left behind.
And it's a Canadian success story, and it just warms your heart. Thomas, you're an energy regulatory consultant and act as an intervener for the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Business of Canada. Tell us what that means. What is your business?
So I'm an engineer and an accountant with more than 48 years of experience in the energy industry in Ontario. I'm a graduate of McGill University and the University of Toronto, by the way. I'm an independent consultant specializing in energy regulatory affairs. I represent clients, including the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada, in rates and facilities proceedings at the Ontario Energy Board. These proceedings are about various energy utilities, such as Toronto Hydro or Lexicon, seeking approvals for rate increases, which are opposed by my clients. My business is fighting to keep energy affordable in Ontario.
So you really are a champion for small to medium-sized businesses to make sure that their electricity rates don't go through the roof. Shalini, we got about a minute left. Can you tell us how important affordable energy is to manufacturing competitiveness and how it impacts your business?
Absolutely. I mean, I think right now is a good segue into something like this, where operating costs are going through the roof in every which way. And this is not just related to energy and regulated services. This is commodity pricing for raw materials for us, and then just overall price increases in transportation. So in order to be able to stay competitive, we have to look for ways of savings, efficiency gains, and be able to really compete at the global scale, which for us would be India. So right now, electricity plays a big part in that, in just being able to sustain any growth that we would have gotten.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because we got to go to break. We're going to pick this up after the break. You're watching Canadian Innovators. We're back and we're talking about the push for green energy in this province and the real life impacts on manufacturing. Shalini, before we went to break, you were talking about competitiveness. Please finish your thought.
Absolutely. I think as a Canadian manufacturer, especially, we have our own ideas and ways of working. And what happens is we do not have a population to sustain that much growth. So you have to be able to export, and we want to be able to support those exports. Now, in order to do that, you are now dealing or working with US companies, US manufacturers, and in our case, because we make primarily East Indian snacks, a lot of our competition comes directly out of India. Now, when you look at the manufacturing playing field and you look at the regulations that Canadian businesses, primarily in even Ontario, have to work through, these are not the same regulations that India and or the US have to deal with. So right off the bat, we are already at a disadvantage. And at the end of the day, one of the things is any, monies that are made are usually put right back into the company and in terms of investment. So it's not, being able to get efficiency gains to get a bigger profit. It is so we can invest more in our people, more in our processes, and be able to go out and do new product development. So it's a full circle that happens.
So you brought some pictures of your manufacturing process. We're going to take a look at them. Tell us what we're seeing here and how you manufacture your product.
Absolutely. So this is a picture of what we call our continuous fry line. Now, this is primarily run on natural gas. And we have 4 of these massive lines. This line will employ about 4 to 8 people, depending on the product, per shift. And it is it's a pretty significant piece of equipment that requires skilled labor. So, the manufacturing jobs that are here at our company right now are skilled labor. This is our bake line, similar to our continuous fry line, but this will generate biscuits and cookies for us. Also, primary source is natural gas. So, we are not a high energy user, but we are high enough that, and it's a very big expense for us currently in able to operate here.
Yeah, and the push to freeze out natural gas is very concerning to a lot of manufacturers. We're going to get back to that in a minute. Thomas, you wrote to the coalition a report on energy policy in this province, and you entitled it, "These Are Dark Times." And I'd like to discuss what was in that report. You talked about the political leaders pushing climate emergency and net zero policies. And we are told that from our politicians that there's a need for energy transition to a future where everything will be motorized vehicles, everything will be electric, all homes will have electric vehicle chargers, electric space heating and water heating. Businesses and manufacturers will only be able to use electricity for energy. But you said in that report that the current Ontario electricity distribution grid is not designed to handle this, and that we'll have to modernize it. And can you tell us what this will entail and what it would cost both manufacturers and Ontario citizens?
Yes, I can. So currently in Ontario, natural gas provides more than twice the amount of energy that is provided by electricity. At peak, natural gas provides 5 times the amount of energy that is provided by electricity. And then petroleum products, mainly gasoline and diesel, provide 99% of the energy used in transportation. Net zero and just transition plans call for replacement of all of this energy now delivered by natural gas and petroleum products using gas distribution mains and oil and gas pipelines to be delivered by the electricity distribution grid. And that's wires that you see on the streets hanging on poles. This increase in capacity will need to be built and paid for, and it will cost a lot of money, which will lead to increased electricity distribution rates. Home charging of electric vehicles also poses problems, while slow chargers, which these are 110 volts, pose no problems at all. As few as 5 homes on a typical street using fast chargers at the same time, these are the 240-volt chargers, can overload the circuit on a, let's say, Toronto street. To accommodate widespread home charging of electric vehicles, the distribution grid will need to be rebuilt. Then there is the problem of rooftop solar and home batteries, which can cause voltage fluctuations as they connect and disconnect from the grid. To accommodate them, the distributors will need to install voltage control equipment and new circuit breakers, and a lot of other equipment as well. All of this will result in higher distribution rates, which will be paid for by manufacturers and businesses.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there because you had some startling stats in that report, but we have to go to break. You're watching Canadian Innovators. We're back, and we are talking about the push for green energy in this province of Ontario and the real-life impacts on manufacturing. I'm joined by Shalini Seth, Director of Surati Sweets and Energy Regulatory Consultant Tom Ladanyi. Tom, before we went to break, we were talking about your report. You said in the next 2 years, electricity distribution rates could be 50% higher than today because we need this improvement in infrastructure. Can you comment on this?
Yes, well, this improvement in infrastructure actually is, I would call it self-inflicted, because nobody's forcing Ontario to do this. This is some place that Ontario politicians are taking us. I don't see any manufacturers asking that they want the rates to be higher or that they want to convert from gas to electricity. And there are certain advantages to, let's say, to using gas. As we know, gas it tends to heat up water much faster. As you know, gas water heater works faster than an electricity water heater for baking and cooking. And I think we discussed that as well. In baking, it takes more time to bake something with electricity and to bring it up to heat than it does with gas. So replacing gas is going to be expensive, not only in increased rates for electricity and energy, but also in loss in productivity and efficiency. And they will continue. Yes, I say that could result in loss in jobs.
Okay, Shalini, after hearing what Thomas has said, how do you think this is going to impact your business?
I mean, right off the bat, just higher cost. I mean, when we look at any margins, especially in food and beverage, if people are not familiar, they're very, very small margins. And, to get it, as a manufacturer into the retailer, and then the retailer, obviously making some money and then going to the end user. So at the end of the day, price increases are going to be a given, which will impact the end user for food. I mean, we are already hearing so many stories of people and affordability and their grocery pricing going up. So outside of just higher cost related to this infrastructure or just the distribution, Tom made a comment on, things taking longer. So at that point, any efficiencies that you are getting through, cook times and, process changes, all of that will have to be relooked at. And at the end of the day, if that means, same amount of people, same building, same structure, but less output, that automatically will be higher costs for us as manufacturers. And the other side of it is capacity, right? At this point, if a lot of people are at capacity or, on the verge of, straining their capacity, if you're making less, where does that come from? Overtime, added cost. If you're, getting people to work on weekends, what does that do to family life? So there's so many repercussions of something such as this, not just related to the cost of energy distribution.
Now, Shalini, just related to what we were just talking about, the push from net zero is promoted from those who assume manufacturers are not looking out for the environment. And I know that Surati takes the environment very seriously. Tell us about your efforts.
So, for our packaging, we look at minimal packaging for our products. So, we look at increased shelf life. We've done a lot of work with packaging development to be able to come with minimal packaging, recyclable packaging, and then even within our own programs internally, being able to reuse and recycle a lot of the material, including our waste, our oil. Any of our used oil actually goes to a feed farm to be made into feed for chickens. So, we at any given time, we internally are doing a lot of things already. And it's not to say that we do not care about the environment or even don't want it to be a sustainable source. That is garbage, to be honest with you. I mean, it's this narrative that, it's dirty, which could be further from the truth. So,
and it's also a narrative that businesses need to be controlled because they don't do the right things without policy, which is absolutely not true. Tom, we only have a minute left, but from your perspective, what do you see for Ontario manufacturing with these net zero policies, and how could this be different? And we just got about 30 seconds left.
Okay, I think it would be difficult for Ontario manufacturing to absorb the increases in energy costs that net zero and just transition will bring. Some plants will close and jobs will be lost. I think the Ontario manufacturers will have to stop net zero and just transition plants before it is too late.
Absolutely. It will be devastating, and it looks like the long-term consequences haven't been fully studied. So we need to take a quick break. Don't go away. You're watching Canadian Innovators on the News Forum Network. Stay with us. Welcome back. My guests today are Shalini Seth, Director of Surati Sweet, and Energy Regulatory Consultant Tom Ladanyi, and we're talking about the push for the green energy program and net zero. Shalini, the just transition is proposed by the Canadian federal government. Your thoughts on this legislation, and what will it mean for your business in Canada?
I think I'll just start off by saying, what is this just transition? I mean, we take for granted, or we assume that everyone, they bring the people to the table and they make these decisions. But to be honest with you, I don't think there's enough information out there for us as manufacturers to even know what the true impact is. And, even been given a chance to come to the table to give the true picture of what will happen. So for us, as I mentioned, we're a food manufacturing company. We rely on natural gas for our processes, for all 90% of our products. So at that point, what does that really mean? And does that mean we have to reformulate everything? Does that mean we have to change our processes? Does that mean we shut down certain lines? So I think, to be honest with you, I don't know the true impact, because I don't even know what this just transition is about, because it hasn't been presented properly to the Canadian population, especially business owners.
Right. And if just a recent poll said that a majority of Canadians don't know what is in this just transition plan. So that's concerning. Folks, this is the part of the show that every week I ask my guest, if you're a politician, what 3 things you would do to grow jobs in the economy. Tom, I'm going to start with you. You're on the hot seat. What would you do?
Well, I would seek a commitment from politicians that energy costs would not increase by more than the rate of inflation. So the increases that we're seeing in electricity distribution rates in Ontario now are above the rate of inflation, and they're a result of self-inflicted wounds by our politicians on our province. Secondly, I would stop all programs that subsidize new technology winners, such as the Chrysler Stellantis battery plant in Windsor. The new technology winners provide a few jobs, but in the process, we hurt a lot of other manufacturers who actually lose even more jobs. And lastly, I would eliminate carbon taxes. I think carbon taxes are a huge drag on the Canadian economy and also on the Ontario economy. And they do not allow Ontario companies to compete fairly with other companies around the world.
Agree 100% with your 3 policies. Shalini, you're up. What would you do?
The first thing I would do is ask the questions. I would actually, talk to the small to medium-sized businesses, get a true picture of what is required and what is currently the policies being written, and actually revisit all of those. The second thing, similar to what Tom was saying, carbon tax is another tax, another burden, and not with any real end result. And the third thing I would do is look at other economies. And, we want to be, as Canadian manufacturers, as Canadian businesses on the global scale, what else are other countries doing, and what is working and what isn't working? Because there's enough, countries out there that have tried to adopt this and it has backfired. So why, go down that same path? What's going to make it different? So, really look at any of the policies that are being implemented and trying to be enforced.
So, Tom, I'm going to give you the last word. We just have about 30 seconds left. What's your prediction for manufacturing in the next 2 years if these policies should come to fruition?
Well, I think manufacturing is going to be what is going to happen in Ontario. What's happened in Germany and what is happening in the UK is because of high energy costs, manufacturers are closing their plants in those two countries, and they're moving their production, if they can, to other countries with lower costs. And if Ontario wants to continue with high energy costs, then that's inevitable what's going to happen. So we have to all fight to preserve jobs in Ontario. So just transition, by the way, is always talked about in terms of jobs in Alberta, but it is also about jobs in Ontario. Just transition is going to lose a lot more jobs in Ontario than it will in Alberta. We have to fight for our jobs here in Ontario.
Absolutely. Thanks, Thomas and Shalini. That's all the time we have for today. We're going to have to pick this up at another time. Great conversation.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to my guest, Shalini Seth, Director of Surati Sweets and Energy Regulatory Consultant Tom Ladanyi. Canada and Ontario are going down a green energy policy path that seems to have not been fully analyzed for the cost of manufacturing, the impacts of jobs, and the cost to Canadians. Will the cost be worth it when you consider how incredibly low the contribution Canada has to the world's greenhouse gases? I'm Jocelyn Bamford. Thank you for watching Canadian Innovators, and we'll see you next time.